Hey Mike, so if David Paulides' theory is right about how Bigfoots and humans can mate, what are the ramifications of that, and what next?
Well, it's a very interesting thing because, part of science is that you come up with a hypothesis to explain some phenomenon, and then based on your hypotheses, you formulate predictions because, certain things might be predictable based on other laws that you're trying to establish as factual. So, if Bigfoot is capable of mating with human beings, and this is what the Chehalis Indians said way back in the 1920s, this is what Dave Paulides is now saying in his new book, Tribal Bigfoot. If this is the case, then the ramifications would be what? Well, there would be hybrids. There would be beings amongst us on the planet that are half Bigfoot and half human. Now, what happens when a half Bigfoot, half human goes and then mates with another human and has an offspring? Then that offspring becomes what? It becomes a little more human and a little less Bigfoot. Okay, so then that one mates with another human. So what would happen? So what that would indicate is that there would be crossbreeds around the country in these forested areas where these Bigfoot reports are coming from, and they would have a tendency in some cases to be more or less human-like and less Bigfoot-like. Now, what Dave has also suggested is that working with Harvey Pratt and doing drawings from eyewitnesses, they're coming up with drawings that are much more human-like, and he's suggesting that Patty, the creature in the Patterson-Gimlin film, might actually be a case of hypertrichosis, that she's actually a hairier than usual Bigfoot, for example. This is one suggestion that he's brought up. Could be. How can we say? We don't know for sure. Okay, so if the Bigfoot and the humans can mate and have viable offspring, then what would you expect? If Bigfoot came across the land bridge and entered this continent in the Pacific Northwest, where the Bering Straits are, and then over the course of centuries mated, had offspring, and these offspring mated and so forth, and then started spreading across the United States, then you would expect, and you would have to suggest that you might predict that as you go east, you're going to find Bigfoots that are more human-like than the ones that you would be finding in the Pacific Northwest. In other words, you would have more purebred Bigfoots closer to the source of origin and more half-breeds and so on further away. And guess what? That seems to be the case because Bigfoot reports from around the country, as you get further from the Pacific Northwest, the Bigfoot that are reported tend to, in many instances, tend to be more human-like. They tend to be described as not quite as big, not quite as robust, not quite as athletic looking. They have a little less hair. Some people reported a lot less hair on their Bigfoots. So the anecdotes do tend to back up this prediction. So with there being different hybrids with different amounts of Bigfoot blood versus human blood, then you would have all these different configurations possible. And then if you had on top of that, for example, some inbreeding going on, then maybe that would explain why some of these would have 3 toes, or 6 toes, or whatever number of toes, and would have these aberrations about their body parts. It would also explain why there are people who insist that in certain parts of the country and mountainous areas, especially in Appalachia, that there are these feral humans that live in the forest. They don't call them Bigfoots, they call them feral people. Probably because they look a hell of a lot more like humans than the Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot, and therefore they don't have a tendency to think of them as Bigfoots. So, bingo. That's what you would predict would be these different hybrids showing up, and perhaps that's what anecdotal information is agreeing with.